All right, you guys, welcome to this episode of the Outrun Show. We're coming in hot because the banter has already begun. Main topic today, coaching faux pas. We'll say that.
Coaching crimes.
Sounds
Coaching
creepy.
crimes. The alliteration.
Okay, coaching crimes. It just sounds like unsolved
Crimes
mysteries.
against coaching.
Crimes against
coaching. Crimes against coaching. I like that one. Crimes against coaching. We're also discussing what's the best way to look at your TV. Streaming platforms. Love them, hate them. What's your favorite? What's your go-to? Are you somebody who's just like getting by with the default like operating system of your Samsung TV, or are you somebody who's like, no, I go to Apple TV, right? Mm-hmm. And would we ever buy a supercar? Wow, that's just here I am in my garage, and more on today's Outrun Show.
Supercars first. Yeah, the fastest car I would ever drive would be a Cybertruck.
The fastest? Why?
Fastest car.
So here we have to
Although
classify.
that's
Do you
very
classify like your Model X and your Cybertruck as a supercar? Considering like what do we define as like supercar, right? Because performance wise, they blow supercars out of the water.
True.
So technically, if it's performance, they are supercars. But price tag wise, they're an entire figure cheaper than supercars.
Yeah, I think that from my understanding of not being a car guy but watching a lot of Netflix, which will be our next topic, is that the supercar is a car that can travel at like race-like speeds, but it's available to the consumer. Like usually they're street legal and really exceptional in a particular way. But I'm sure various car people would be really pissed right now. This is not a car. Like this is even though it is Outrun and we do overdrive. Maybe we should polish up our car.
We'll get our
vernacular.
We'll get our Cybertruck.
I follow a car driver on Instagram,
so you're a car guy now.
Yeah, you're a car guy. I don't know. Anyway, Cullen, are you a car guy?
I'm okay with cars.
Cullen is our executive producer.
Yeah, they're all right. Yeah, freaking cars. My dad has two R8s.
Your dad has two R8s.
Different colors. I think one is gray.
See, when your dad was like, I have an R8, I was like, all right, you know. But you're like, I have two. Now you're getting definitely that's a supercar guy.
Right.
Yeah,
He's like, I have two.
One
Okay.
has a circular exhaust. The other has rectangular.
And
And
that was
different
reason
colors.
enough to buy a different one?
I think he wants to supercharge one and the other's turbocharged. I don't know the difference.
Wow.
There
There
is
is
a
both go
difference,
very
yeah.
fast.
Oh, that's cool. All right.
So we don't know what the actual definition of supercar is.
I feel like I'm pretty close, but
all
right.
I could define it for you.
all right.
It's,
So Jess is would you say you're anti-supercar though?
I'm just like I'm anti.
You're anti-car
for the most part.
So how did you end up without a car? Tell that story just real quick.
Yeah,
Like-
so I moved to Fort Collins, and then like within a month of moving to Fort Collins, I think it was 2 months when we had just gotten our apartment. I was in like a 5-car like pile up, and I was the middle one in that pile up.
So you can't be held responsible.
No, I still got a ticket.
Okay.
Which is the wonder of the American justice system. Is that I lost my only mode of transportation, and I had to pay a fee. This is great. But no, so I was in that pile up, and I crashed my car, and then the insurance company was like, hey, that's totaled. And I was like, I could have told you that. By
What
the way,
car was this?
It was a Kia Soul.
Kia
By
Soul.
the way, that
The
like,
hamster,
already a boxy car
Mhm.
was a literal box.
Yeah.
It was a square when I climbed out of it. Great safety. I was never worried for my safety, which is awesome. But yeah, and then the insurance was like, hey, yeah, here's how much we'll pay for the total. And I was like, hey, that was a pretty good chunk of change right there. And it was like, and I already live in Fort Collins. I work in Fort Collins. It's wonderful weather out here for the most part.
Mhm.
And so
Yeah, the winters are huge.
I took that. Justin also needed a new car, so half of that went to buying him a new car because he was driving like a 2004 like Mitsubishi Eclipse.
That
was, like,
Eclipse?
Yeah, I
Skyline
got half
color?
Jesse's insurance.
Wow.
Yeah, he
Yeah,
did.
that was impressive. But you had that color of that Eclipse is what really made it of its era. This is like your
Yeah.
90s Eclipse.
Yeah,
like
ice
just how you
blue.
would imagine it.
Yep.
Oh yeah,
Ice blue
Baby
90s
blue.
baby blue 90s Eclipse.
Yeah,
Not
and
the
it was
baby
such
blue
a-
that
it was
Stuff's got right
such
now.
a Justin Justin car too.
Uh,
But yeah, so that thing was like on its last leg. It was dying. So we took half of that to buy Justin a new car, and then I took the other half and I spent $400 and I bought a single speed bicycle. And I took the rest and I put it in a retirement account.
Yeah.
And I've never looked back.
That's a responsible adult. That's thrift right there. You yeah, but then later on, like how many years before you got another motorized mode of transportation? Because you do have a Ruckus.
Yeah, I bought a little scooter 2 years ago now, a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
For $2,000.
Yeah.
Bought it. It had like 100 miles on it. $2,000. It was great. Gets like 95 miles to the gallon.
You just tool around on that guy now.
Yeah. Now I just tool around on that guy, or I just walk where I need to go. It's great. I don't think that like cars should disappear. I'm not like that hardcore like eco guy. But I do think about 60% of the cars on the road could disappear and people could still function, and they might actually function happier because they're getting some form of exercise by biking to work or walking to work rather than sitting in their box to go sit in a box.
So that was a good both economic and environmental decision. I think we made pretty good decisions.
It was a circumstance forced on me for sure, but I was like, I'm gonna roll with this because how often do you get
big payouts like that,
5-figure like payout just dropped into your pocket?
Yeah.
And I was like, I'll take it.
Just keep the money, and then go with the Ruckus. So that's good. And then you guys are also a single. I mean, you could argue the Ruckus is another mode of transportation, but really you're a single vehicle household.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
My
wife bought a car.
In our region, in Merica, that's not typical. Like if you live in New York or Chicago, maybe you don't even own a car.
Yeah,
like,
a lot of people don't even have a driver's license.
But when you get outside of those really dense city areas, I think even in LA they drive cars. It's really rare to not have people who are married or even dating and have less than 2 cars. That's not typical.
Yeah, it's like one car per adult.
Yeah, per adult in the house. Yep.
And
sometimes
that
more
blows my mind.
Like when I moved to Colorado, I had a 3-stall garage that was a pickup truck, a car, and then a riding lawnmower.
That's a riding lawnmower?
Yeah.
For your severance house?
Yeah. Yeah. And it had its own garage door.
You had like a good sized backyard, but I don't know if it was riding lawnmower.
Because I came from Iowa, and Iowa grass grows like the hair on Justin's legs. It's just furry, nonstop, right? So you have to have some machinery. Everybody has a little tractor.
Yeah,
in Iowa,
right? Out here you mow like once a week during like peak season.
I'm excited when it looks like my lawn could take a mowing in Colorado. I'm like, you look like you could actually be mowed and still look like you're well taken care of. Right.
Yeah.
That's another one. Grass is kind of done like that. All right. We digress. But no supercars. Like why did you were opposed to the supercar?
I'm super opposed to the supercar.
We were talking about it if we were to grow old and retire and sort of like get a garage or something that you would just have like whatever you wanted in it, because that just seemed like that's not really a dad thing. That's like a grandpa thing, right? Yeah. That we were joking that Jesse's would be filled with like parkour equipment instead of like classic cars or supercars or something like that.
Yeah, there'd be like a little studio with mirrors and like vinyl floor, laminate flooring for like dance. Mm-hmm. There'd be a bunch of high level parkour stuff that I can't build for classes because it's just too dangerous.
Yeah,
or the kids just can't use it yet. Mm-hmm. And then there would be one of those like gaming cockpits where it's like that would be my warehouse. That would be in my warehouse. Right? Those are the 3 things that I care about right there in my warehouse. Mm. But no cars. No, if I keep telling Carly that we'll buy a Cybertruck when her car dies. Mm. Her car's in great shape, unfortunately. So we're probably 10 years out from that. Yeah, it doesn't look like it's in great shape, but engine-wise,
hold up so much.
The Nissans hold up, man.
So when that dies, we'll buy a Cybertruck, which will still be an friendly move, which is what I care about. Mm-hmm. I care about it being most importantly. I care about trying to leave this place a little better than we got it. But also like it's a sedan, so it's not like we can throw furniture in the back or anything like that. So we need some sort of truck, but trucks are historically awful on gas mileage.
True.
And I just can't buy a motorized vehicle. So the Cybertruck just came at a perfect time. I was like, yes,
Well, yeah.
By the time it comes into production, when it comes into production, we'll hopefully be right around the time where we're ready to buy. So
love the Cybertruck, totally our style. Our designer did our logo on the side of a Cybertruck as a joke,
fun. Yeah.
For fun. I mean, I don't think it's a joke. I think it's gonna happen someday.
It's gonna happen. If it glows like that on the side of the truck, is the other question.
Really
the logo's getting on there,
but yeah. So no supercar for me, ever.
Would not own a supercar. That was the ultimate question: is would you own a supercar? So he says no supercar.
I don't think so either.
Justice says no supercar.
Oh my gosh, no. I mean, how cleaning it? You have to. It's another hobby. It's another skill to learn how to
its own
clean.
little house and place to live.
You have to. Either taking it somewhere to have professionals clean it, or you have to have a whole nother weapons depot of cleaning your car in your garage. So it's just. That's not gonna happen.
Well, and if you lived in LA where the weather's pretty nice year round, here, I don't know if you remember, there was a guy when we were in Steamboat last that was on the shuttle, and I was chatting with him, and he's a wealthy guy had flown in to ski for the weekend because he's bougie like that. Flies into the Steamboat Airport, but he was like, I wanted to drive here, but I don't like driving my car in the snow. And he was, I don't remember what his car was, but, and somebody had asked him, they were like, oh, it's does it do well in the snow? Or what's the, and he's like, no, it does great in the snow. It's the salt that gets on the car itself and it makes the paint. Like cleaning off that salt afterwards. He's like, it's such a pain because you can't just spray it and wipe it because then the salt essentially scratches all the paint.
And then we use salt here, right?
Or something. Yeah, whatever it is. Whatever
because
mag chloride is what the mix is, right?
Yeah, but some regions just use sand. When I was in Iowa, we just used sand.
Even the sand, right? So he was saying
salt.
He was saying that you couldn't it kind of a pain because you essentially have to hose the entire car down for 5 to 10 minutes to make sure all the grains run up, and then you can clean it. And I was just like,
they can still scratch the paint.
Man, yeah, that's a lot.
Man, these are some first world problems.
Problems. Sure.
So you say no supercar as well.
They also can't drive themselves. They're not comfortable. They're built for
same function.
Adrenaline and it's just
supplies
you have to take that car to the track, which then I would just keep it at the track, and at that point I would just rent it and now I'm just doing go-karts.
And in which case, you can literally just show up to the track and rent a supercar and drive it for all the function that you're gonna get. Yeah, agreed. Travis though. What do you think?
I don't know. That's tough because I look at them like the Pagani. I look at them as art in some ways. I think that they're a really cool representation of future art because some of them are so well designed and crafted and they just look beautiful, but there's this engineering element to it, and it's sort of it's difficult for humanity to express its desire to move into something more than human when it comes to technology and engineering. But cars have always been a good way to represent that because they have a function. They can move you around, but you can also employ pretty hot, whatever's cutting edge technology at that time into it, and art and design into it. I think that some supercars may be one of the more, at least Western, in Western culture, the more human things that are, I'm pretty sure that if Da Vinci was alive, he might be working on a car, right? It's just
yes.
They are supreme levels of engineering.
They can be, right? Because some of them are just speed, and some of them are I want to feel I can. Some of the Lambos are I want to feel I can drive it, but I want to look like I'm in something that's super fast. That I did have a Lambo. Did you know that?
You had some lamb talk.
I did.
A lawnmower Lambo?
No, it wasn't. It was a 90s Lambo waterbed.
Oh,
you know what I'm talking about? When I was a kid, I had the cart, OSB cutout of a. I didn't build it. It was what you would buy. Shout out if you ever had a Lambo waterbed. It was a black one, and then above it I had one of those poster or the calendars that had the supercars on it. And yeah, I had no idea what I was into. I was just a kid, and you're that's awesome. My car is
sleep in a car.
Yeah, I was sleeping in a car. I'm gonna sleep in my Lambo. Oh, it's so fast to sleep. I don't know.
I'm glad waterbeds kind of fell out of style too.
I don't know what's up with that. That's.
But yeah, no, supercars. Terrible. I agree with you. Supercars are definitely art. right? Because even just the ability to go that fast, while there is the engine itself requires a ton of engineering, no pun intended. The shape of the car, the aerodynamics of the car has to support that as well. Otherwise, your car just right, or you get so much drag. So there's a lot of I'm sure they spent just as much money on, if not more, on somebody or a team of people to design what it looks like so it functions well and can go that fast, but also looks really cool, right? Because you could just design a needle shape, and people are like, that doesn't look that cool.
I also just kind of sometimes want to look like Batman.
Yeah.
Like one of my buddies, back in Iowa has an NSX, and when you drive around that thing, you just feel like you're Batman. Yeah,
but let's be realistic. Batman didn't drive. He lives in Gotham City. You think he's going to deal with traffic like that?
But he always would just he'd just drive around for a little bit and then he'd fly. Isn't that how it went? Anyway.
It's all just for the movie.
All for show.
You know Bruce Wayne never drove a day in his life.
Except
for fun. He flew, okay? He went to the top of Wayne Tower and he flew wherever he needed, or glided to wherever he needed.
In his little light jet to him.
Yep.
All right, shall we?
So wait, you never answered. You said maybe.
Yeah, I think I would have to be at that point in my life where something crazy happened and I was just an art collector. I think if I was going to move further into some sort of is aristocrat the word I'm looking for? Yeah.
Sure.
Crazy amount of wealth. I don't know. I don't know how that would happen. Win the lottery. And that I could see myself being interested in something like that. But it would definitely be the design and art thing. It would definitely be I'm not doing this for speed.
Because you're a car guy.
I'm not an engineer who's that interested. I'm just this is so freaking cool and human and from the future. And just the experience of being in it and around it was cool enough that I'd be yeah, and I would want this to preserve it so that in the future people could enjoy it and look back on it the way that we look back on some things that are even 50 years old and get excited about as far as technology and design goes. But I definitely don't have something I'm compensating for.
Well, you don't have to. For some people.
But yeah, I don't think the first thing I'm going to do if for some reason I became super wealthy would be to go buy a Lambo and shove it in my garage. That's just, although I do the older Lambos from Wolf of Wall Street.
I don't think I ever finished that movie.
The Countach, yeah. They're so retro and cool, and the doors come up on the side, stuff like that's cool. But I don't understand why. I mean, they're hundreds of thousands of dollars.
A lot of money. Could go elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
You split it in half, still get a cool car, and still have $75,000 to do something with.
Build your parkour garage.
Yeah. Exactly. So.
All right, there you go for the car bus. We don't always talk about video games, and you can see how we stumbled through some car talk.
Yeah.
Car talk. Car talk. Car talk with Outrun.
I should, because that's the first instance of Outrun, huh? It was a racing game.
So, yeah.
Maybe on a future episode, we'll all play that game.
Oh,
yeah.
Gosh.
We'll stream it. There we go.
Yeah,
we'll put
stream battle on it. Right. Yes,
we'll
exactly.
Just, play Outrun.
That's awesome. Okay. Should we, speaking of streaming, should we skip past streaming and go right to the meat of things?
Let's go. Crimes against coaching.
Crimes against coaching.
Move in there. So, the reason this thing came up is because we're coaches, and we've been coaching for a long time now, and we ourselves have committed a great many of these crimes.
Crimes against coaching.
But we're trying. As a process of learning. And so now we hope that by talking about these things, if you're a budding coach or whatever, that you can learn from these things and either catch yourself before they happen, or catch your coach and gently and kindly steer them somewhere else. So let's start with Justin, because I think Justin actually has the most fervent passion against coaching crimes.
Oh no, I'm battling on. I might, maybe.
I do have.
I have some opinions on this one.
Yeah.
Good.
But I have some quirky names that I've been working on.
Oh, I didn't come up with any names of mine.
I know. I'm sorry. So I had.
He's been pinging the staff chat for the past week or two.
Yeah.
Thinking about it. All right.
I've been thinking about these for a while,
But you've been pinging for names.
Yeah, I've been looking
Snapchat.
for inspiration for names because I think when sort of you create a persona around some of the faux pas, right? It's easier to call it out and not have a person. I'm always looking for ways to like nudge people that doesn't like jar them,
insulting.
right?
Yeah.
Right. It's not insulting. I mean, maybe somebody take offense by it, but if we all know that that's just sort of like that's the persona and you're sort of not you as an individual aren't that person. This is like,
Yeah, I mean, like if the persona is named like Huckett Harry and you're talking to Coach Harry,
Yeah.
like,
yeah,
that might not sell well.
that might not so, but Huckett Harry's great, but that's an athlete. That's an athlete
for
right?
sure.
I have a name for Huckett Harry's coach though.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. So do you want to start that?
I think we should say we've been talking about doing this episode for a while now because this is going to be an earlier topic, but for whatever reason we had other stuff we were talking about. But basically, it's just like kind of involves alignment with like how if you're a coach, should you avoid certain things, and then also like our own pet peeves when we've been coached, and then also if you are watching your coach, some things you can keep an eye out for. Now, there's nothing harder than trying to coach a group and like having a bunch of parents or other people spectate you coaching and then try to like meet everyone's needs and they don't understand what the chemistry is. Like I've had some people say to me, "Oh, Trav, on first day I came in and I heard you coach and I was really afraid of you." And I was like, "What? Like, why were you afraid?" And Emily said that. Mm-hmm. And she was like, "Oh, I was really afraid of you." She's like, "Oh," then like 2 or 3 days. I think actually Taylor said something like that too. She's like, not afraid, but just like intimidated. I thought you were super serious. And then you get to know what I've spent a lot of time building rapport so that if I make jokes or take withdrawals, basically, then there's that balance. Like people still feel like I have compassion for them. And I think that's what's most important. So laying that, let's talk about some of the things that we've seen or mistakes have been made. So I think the first one that I would bring up is and we see this a lot in parkour, I would call it the YOLO coach. So I would describe YOLO coaching as always feeling like you need to impress the student because they may be as bored as you are with the curriculum. and in doing so, right?
Yeah.
In doing so, you just look for continuously like harder and bigger stuff and just, okay, guys, we're going for the gap to the 10-foot pillar today. Why? Have they tried jumping 2 feet? Nope, because I'm bored with the curriculum. That's like YOLO coach would totally just go for the biggest stuff. And then there's no progressions, right? Mm-hmm. So it's straight man, we're going to do this. We're going to get this jump. We're going to jump to this bar without testing.
There's just you get a talented kid who you show something and they get it in a couple of tries. And so they're like, oh, cool. Well, the next thing is just farther and farther and farther, right? Absolutely. But for a talented athlete, they go farther and farther until they break, right? They're the supercar. Mm-hmm. They just keep going.
Those things break a lot. Am I right? Yeah, they break a lot.
And so a smart coach or a smart driver is like, oh, yeah, after I've redlined it for, a couple of laps, I should probably let a mechanic look at it, clean it up before I take it out on the track again. But if every single time you take it on the track every single day with no maintenance and you're just redlining it,
you're just trying high impact stuff. You're gonna, the YOLO coach is gonna be the coach who's like, well, it's trying to work on backflips.
The YOLO coach is absolutely you only live once because the coach isn't gonna get hurt when the athlete yeets himself across the
it's not the coach saying I only live once, so I'm gonna go for it.
The coach is like, you
all my students, you only get one shot.
You only live one time, so you might as well just
go big. Yeah.
I think sometimes the YOLO coach will also yeet out a few movements and be like, look, I yeeted it out, so can you, kind of thing. That could be. So there could be many.
But YOLO, so the one thing I
how'd you curb YOLO coaching?
Well, I think you have to acknowledge that it is easy, and I don't blame too many people for becoming YOLO coach because kids want you to be the YOLO coach.
It's what they ask for.
The kids will ask for YOLOing. They will be like, put it higher, let me jump off this. It'll be constant pressure, and you have to fight that.
They'll be like, I've been watching 8 hours of Storer and Jesse LaFleur. I need some action, right?
If you ever had a kid that's been like, when are we gonna do the real parkour? Like that question right there is, that's a tough one. And like, especially if you got like parents up here watching, they're like, yeah, when are you gonna teach my kid real parkour?
When's he gonna do something I can post
so
on Instagram?
that's when I'm like, that's when it's hardest to not be a YOLO coach. And I think when kids ask you that, or they're like, can you do a backflip? Well, then what are we doing? Like, what's real parkour? I think you just have to ask the students to, prove that they deserve your backflip, or they deserve the YOLO move, or the bigger jump by doing the smaller progressions.
And also, the progressions are key. And when you get to that big move, it shouldn't feel that big. I mean, typically. You do have some scenarios where we're talking about stress and fear challenges is more advanced, but you should be working on enough progression that you feel some sense of confidence that you can do it, even if it's a scary move. Whether you can do a backflip or not should not be discovered in the middle of it. You know what I mean? It's like, wonder if I can do a backflip. So you throw a backflip and you're like, I've learned now I cannot. Too bad I'm upside down and going to fall on my head, right? That's YOLO coaching. So progressionless coaching is YOLO coaching.
Yeah.
So on the other side of progressions, I have another crime against coaching archetype, and that is the crash test dummy coach.
Yeah. I think also YOLO coaching is.
We may need more time for YOLO coaching. That could be an entire episode.
It is a really big one. It also forgets like one of the coolest parts about parkour, and that is the variation and changing and the lateral progressions that you have. Because when you do a move one place, when you learn an 8-foot broad jump, one of the coolest things about parkour is you can take that and now apply it over just literally anything you find, right? Mm-hmm. Outside, you're looking for rail precisions at 8 feet. You're looking for curbs precisions at 8 feet. You're looking at cat leaps at 8 feet. So when I feel like people are looking at one move, like a tack to a precision, and they're just scaling it bigger and bigger for their kids, you're just at track. You're just trying long jump, and you're just trying to get further every time. There's nothing original about trying to go bigger every time you land the previous one. So there has to be something else that's more creative than just adding another inch to whatever move you did, right? So.
Right. I mean, to come back to the car analogy again, taking 0.1 seconds off your lap time doesn't really, how much of a change in the experience of the lap is it, right? If you get on a different track, then you have something different. And this is what I remember being analogous to like Kung Fu masters that I really was in there. And the first time I experienced this when we met Daniel Albaca when he came to the gym, and I saw him in jeans do stuff that I was like, what is this person? He's not a human. And it made me feel like I don't know what people are capable of. And it's that feeling and so then I started thinking, what's the upper limit on mastery for parkour? And then I think that parkour's unique characteristic is that it's the environment. So wherever you could find if you take someone who's even at that, like in that advanced skill level, and you put them anywhere in the world in different environments, they're going to have become a master of that environment. And so there's always something to be discovered, right? So if you get bored and you're like, the way we train here at this gym, go to another gym, it's different. You go outside to a campus, it's different. You go to Europe or to Asia and you find somebody who lives in a town that's got different architecture, and you're like, that guy, there's so much to be learned from that master because they've mastered the relationship with their environment. And so there's so many environments, there's so much lateral progression that could occur. No need to YOLO.
Yep.
Unless that's your thing. But
hey, it's just,
if it's your thing, go to track.
It's not creative. Right?
No.
And parkour is inherently born out of a sense of creativity.
Yeah.
Right? A sense of like not wanting to go with the status quo and wanting to discover something new. And if you're just like, oh, great, let's make it bigger.
Has YOLO become the status quo?
No, I don't think so. I think there are a lot of really awesome coaches out there that on the flip side, I don't know what your second archetype is, but I was going to say that the flip side is the coach that never increases the difficulty for their students. They're always working on the techie or goofy challenges where you're like, all right, let's do attack with your heel.
I do have a name for
your elbow or your nose or your ear, right? And so they're too deep on that creativity side, where the kids are never actually being challenged in just a basic way. They're always like, all right, we're gonna you put your arm out, he's gonna tack off your arm, and then we're gonna boost him in the air, and you're like, now you're doing circus stuff, right? Which is cool, but again, is like, if that's all you're teaching and all you're focused on are these like gimmicky moves, now you're doing American
two things going on there. I don't know whether I wanted to call this coach the Krieger coach from Archer, or
Krieger.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, or if I want to call him the mad scientist coach. And this is someone who is devising overly mechanistic, unrelated, hyper refined, like games and scenarios that just are way out in the weeds as far as like what you actually need for what you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you went to their class, you'd be like, this isn't what I recognize as parkour. Or if someone would do it and they'd be so ill prepared because of all of the hypotheses that have been presented to them that you put them in a real scenario and they won't even recognize what they're doing. So this type of coach can easily be absolved in the same way that we pick healthy food without knowing much, and that is, do I recognize that that's a whole food? If I look at the plate, do I see a vegetable that's clearly a vegetable, some meat, and some rice, right? Or do I look there and I'm like, I have no idea what these ingredients are. So if you go in sometimes and you look at what a coach does, this shouldn't be confused with progressions that lead to something else. But a jump is a jump, and if it looks like it's turning into something else, and it just makes no sense what weird little like experiment you're on, I would consider it like mad scientisting. I've seen people do progressions like that where people will list a progression. I'm like, okay, we'll do this, but now balance an apple on your head while you do the tack.
I was going to say, like, a very key defining factor of this coach is the sheer number of props that coach is using.
Yeah.
So this coach bleeds very closely, and I almost called him the same thing, but I think there's a slight difference, and that is the carny coach. As in, like, the carnival carny coach.
Uh-huh.
And this is a coach
Can we
who's
call him
over...
Carnival Coach? I think some people's last name here at Members is Carney.
Oh. Well, I like those guys, but there's exceptions. They're just carny, like, it's like the guy who... You know what I mean? When you go...
Carney Coach?
Yeah, like you go to a...
Corny?
Carnival coach?
It's a lot of syllables. But anyways.
Okay.
They're work in progress.
All right. So this is the person who relies heavily on props, right?
Yeah.
Because you could still have no interest in progressions or digression in your coaching or mechanisms and just be carrying around a bunch of foam noodles and, like, you know, right? You know, like, we call him Krusty. The Krusty coach.
There we go.
The Krusty the clown. Right?
Krusty the clown.
And they're like, hey kids, I got a bunch of noodles, let's do parkour. Right? And then so they're just like whack, and sometimes our games turn into this sometimes, and I'm just like, let's pull it back a little bit, where it just looks like you're going through like the hall of horrors, right? With just like, you know, traps set up, and like, you know, it can be kind of fun with the littler kids, but at some point it's
I think actually it's almost more fun
it's
when
more
it's
fun.
all coaches doing
It's more fun when you have elite athletes because the challenges just get absolutely ridiculous. But nobody's doing them to train.
No.
Right, that's the thing, is nobody's like, oh, this is what our practice is going to be, and we're going to get so good at this laser maze. But we just do them because they're goofy and fun, right? But they don't belong in the coaching or learning environment. They belong in the play
very
and
small
exploration.
doses. Yeah, it's like yeah, you're too into play, like and to the point where it stops you're almost moving the direction of Ninja Warrior, where it's like it's
more like Wipeout, actually.
Yeah, it's more like Wipeout. You're getting too Wipeout. Yeah. So,
which again, like, everybody's watched that show, and you're like, I would love to go and try those things, right? Because they're gimmicky and fun and goofy. But I wouldn't ever like post that on my highlight reel and be like, look how cool I am.
Right.
Like, parkour. I'd be like, yeah, I went on Wipeout and I got, you know, my butt tossed.
Yeah, you would never use Wipeout to like prove your athletic, you know,
prowess.
Yes.
And if you did, you're going to have done some really cool stuff on the show.
I feel like a Wipeout coach might be another type of coach, though, because another horrible coaching style is allowing your student to fail when there's no need for it. Yeah. Like, sometimes people will set up stuff where they know there's risk, but they're like, oh, well, they'll fall and then they'll learn. And it's like, that's
your crash test dummy, right?
Crash test dummy is a little bit different, because crash test dummy's intention is not to...
Some narrow fields
I
here.
I know. But I just, like, have so many critiques. The crash test dummy is slightly different in the sense that they don't know what the person's capable of, so they're going to, like... Okay, so for a good example of this is brand new student, time for cat leaps. Well, I don't know if you can even cat hang, but we're going to test it in the cat leap. Mm-hmm. My favorite one is when you take new students and I see somebody who's relatively new, or they see somebody who's athletic, or maybe they just really aren't paying attention and the person isn't capable, and they'll do something like a cat leap to cat back pre, something like that, like cat leap to cat back, where you've got like 3 like really staple, movements in themselves that are hard to understand, like, doing a cat leap and then actually doing a cat hang. And then,
dismount.
And then you're doing the cat dismount and you're doing a landing position. So you're testing like takeoff, like catch, landing position that's nearly blind. I mean, it's hard to get your head turned around and look. And all those three things, potential risk for injury in separate skills in one movement. You're trying to learn all three of those things. And they're like, I can't get this move. But really, it's like, okay, this is a time for you to be a bit more mechanistic and take a step back and say, okay, what's your takeoff look like? Can you even get there? Can you even land? Okay, cool. Can you even cat hang once you get to the thing? Okay, if you cat back, can you even jump to where, like if we just put like with cat backs, what I'll do sometimes is put a box right where they're going to be coming from, like that wall, and then have them jump to where they're trying to go from the cat back. Mm-hmm. And if they can't do that, then I'm like, well, why am I going to ask you to throw yourself
Spider-Man off the wall and do it, right?
Yeah.
Or even then they're like, I can cat back from, your student will be like, well, I can do the cat back or the broad jump this distance, right? And that's the distance that they're doing this cat to cat or this precision, right? And you're like, but when you have a specific element that's at the end of it, you have to have, you're never going to do a cat back or a precision at true 100% of what you can broad jump or what just sheer distance you can cat back at, right? Mm-hmm. Like you always have to have some in the tank because the landing itself is going to require you to have a little bit of wiggle room, a margin for error, right? Now, maybe if you hit a precision with absolute perfect, you could hit 100%, but that's a 1 in a million that you're going to hit it just perfect where you don't need to counterbalance or anything like that,
and
right?
Do it more than once.
And
which is what we always ask students to do.
We ask them to do
learning catbacks and you're just doing it once, right?
And a coach needs to know like your students are going to want that. They're going to be like, let me take the reins off. Let me out of the gate. Like I'm going, right? And you need to be like, no, because even if let's say that all things go well, your student hits it, it's awesome, everybody's fine. Sweet. That's pretty rare and pretty unlikely. What's more likely is they biff it.
Yeah.
And now you're a month back in mental progression and 2 weeks back in physical recovery, right? Because they're going to take 2 weeks to recover from a rolled ankle or, God forbid, something worse. Mm-hmm. And mentally, they're also going to be like, I don't really want to try that because last time I broke my wrist.
I don't really have that.
Congratulations.
Major fear of like backflips anymore. Haven't had that for a long time, but I know there's a lot of people who just were fine with backflips and then they bailed out of one and then they just never do them again because they're afraid that they don't trust themselves anymore.
Yeah. Well, and that's a common thing too, right? When we do our like backflip workshops, right? Like we will spend an hour of an hour and a half workshop. We will spend an hour and 15 minutes before anybody is attempting a back tuck, right? And sometimes we'll even we'll get all the way there and somebody will be like, I'm ready. And you're like, nope, you're not. You're going to stay over here. And that pisses some people off because they're like, I feel like I'm ready.
Well, the trampoline park lets me do it.
And you might be ready. You might go for it and you land it and it's awesome. But the trade-off is if you miss and you land on your head,
fear.
Everything that we just worked for goes out the window and we're a step back, right? Now we have to come in and I got to teach you how to jump again.
It's not just the student too, because that trauma is being witnessed by the entire other class.
You get secondhand trauma as well from everybody else who's like, oh, I thought Justin's shapes were really good on the drills and he just bailed and I wasn't as confident as he was and now right?
Exactly.
And so it's just like as a coach, it's you got to be able to shut that down and like not be an ego coach and be like, oh, I got to prove that I could teach these people a backflip in an hour and a half, right? You got to be able to be like, no, yes.
Yeah, I think that one of the tools that I've used, because I spend a lot of the time with adults and
they're the trickiest ones.
Yeah, the way they're so easy, like they don't recover as well and they're heavier. And what I mean by that is like kids are so light, like the head to body weight ratio is your biggest risk. Like, you're going to neck injury because you're 40% weight in the head, 60% weight in the body. But adults are different. And so I will tell my adults that I don't know if they ask me, if they press me on it, I'll say I don't really know when you're going to be ready for this, but it's your job to make me not afraid for you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's my level of fear when I see you do things, and anxiety is really my metric as to whether you get to do more.
Yeah.
And so I have to see you do some stuff for a while before I could say confidently, oh, you're ready. You're ready to do this. And I used to do things where I'd have people come in and I'd do an assessment. I'd try and do that in a short amount of time, but now I find I need to spend more time with them, like a month or two of seeing them training and see where their weaknesses are.
Consistency.
There needs to be consistency. I had a student come in and I thought they were pretty strong, and I was doing one of these assessment periods or whatever. I was trying that out, and I just remember them wanting to do like acrobatic stuff, and they're like, okay, cool. And I have them like go. I'm like, could have crawl up the wall and a couple times to do a handstand, right? And then some people think this is a ridiculous progression. This is a backwards wall climb, and they fatigued out in 3 and just sort of like kind of fell over and were bleeding out of their nose. And I'm like, okay, well, it's a good thing we checked that out, and it's otherwise able-bodied, like 20-something, right?
Yeah.
So, you just get to know them and have that awareness and intuition. They'll trust you more too. This leads to that I've had students tell me too, it's like, I'm afraid to do this, but if you tell me I can do it, I believe I can do it. That is powerful, but that only comes from they know that you intimately understand their abilities, and if you're confident in them, they can be, which is the opposite of, again, back to YOLO Coach, because YOLO Coach is going to be yelling, you got this, it's all in your mind.
What the kid's doing, you got this. Yeah, that's a very dangerous,
it also,
it's a tough skill to develop.
It like when you do that with a student and they continue to fail, you're spending a lot of rapport currency, right? Because even if the kid's not registering that like you're saying these things, they are hearing that you're saying you got this, and then they fail. You got this, and then they fail.
And they're gonna say it's their
you
fault.
got this, and then they fail, and they're like, oh, okay, so either A, I suck, which no confidence, or B, my coach doesn't know what he's talking about. He or she's talking about, right? And doesn't know what I'm capable of.
It's sad because it could be both.
It could, and it often is both, right? And so like it's the coach's job to be like, ooh, I've watched him fail that 3 times in a row. I sometimes don't even wait for 3. I'm like at 2, I'm like, come on over here, right? I'm like, here, let's take an easier progression because I want you to get that positive reinforcement on the exact same move, even if it's smaller, right? I want you to feel confident in the movement, so that when we apply it to a new environment, you're like, oh, I understand the movement so well. I can anticipate what it might feel like in this new environment, and I'll pull them off. And that, for kids especially, they're like, let me just keep trying. And they're like, nope.
Yeah,
failed twice, and those fails weren't even like, they weren't great fails. They looked ugly. They looked awful. So we're moving on. We're going to try something else.
Right.
3 is my absolute failure max, but you can almost tell immediately after their first failure or their second one, because if they fail and they failed and their response is like, yeah, you're like, okay, nope, you're going back. The kid imagined himself doing something different, but what he did and what he imagined are completely separate, right? And so it's like, okay, you failed, but you thought you did it right. And so now you're just going to reinforce it over and over again. So
that's the wimp low.
But some students will fail. Yes, exactly. Like, up and over.
My face to your foot style.
Like, wait, what? We trained him wrong as a joke.
So yeah, it's so easy when you see a kid like that and they celebrate their failures. And it's like, okay, I got to break this kid's heart and send him back a couple times because and sometimes if I get stuck there, I'll just video it. And I'll video the whole class, and kids will, once they compare themselves to the other kids, they'll notice their failures. So that's like my easier way to not break their hearts. But if you see a kid and they fail and they're like, I know it, they'll cut me off as I'm about to say what they did wrong. They'll be like, I know, I did it wrong. That was a bad one. That's when I know that they can try again, even though they failed, right? Because they witnessed or they were cognizant of their own failures or mess ups or whatever. So.
And just giving a, like, opening the mind and giving them progressions. Again, lateral, it's like if you have even a 4-foot broad jump, all right, then you should then be able to have a radius of stuff around you that you can jump 4 feet to.
Yeah.
Like, and that's okay. Your parkour jumping distance might end there. It doesn't really matter. It's about your ability to go out and explore and
But
grow.
you
and
might be
advance.
like, I can do a 4-foot precision to
anything.
Mhm.
That's another thing. Very cool point.
Yeah. Put 2 ballpoint pens standing up, all precision.
Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty
4
cool.
feet can feel very large depending on where you're at, or very challenging.
Depending on how high you are.
Yeah.
Yeah, right?
So, the biggest thing I get frustrated at is when coaches, it feels like maybe like the negligent stepdad that just has no feedback whatsoever the whole class, whether something's good or it's bad, and the only like response is like, I don't know, when something crazy happens and you just have to intervene. So, and that it's just tough because this changes every age group. You can have in Sparks and the 5 to 7-year-olds, you can have a kid come up to you and swear they hate cat leaves, and they're just like, I'm never doing it, I'm never gonna hang ever again in my life. And then I can have them hang and then be like, you did so good, you were so great, you had such strong arms in that cat hang, and then literally the minute later they're coming back, I'm so good at this is my favorite thing in the entire world. And like, it's just 1 second of cueing and saying something that and positively encouraging a kid can change their entire outlook on one move. And that changes based on the age. Teenagers, you have to work at a little bit to crack and get that like peer, I don't know, status. And adults, I think, are a little bit harder. But when you finally get adults on your side, you can't ever say anything wrong. If you say something or critique something wrong in that atmosphere, they hold it against you. And that is that one's even harder. So that's what adults scare me the most, because kids, you can undo a mistake.
Yeah,
You
Adults,
can
they're like puppies. They forgive you.
they
again,
forgive,
again,
right?
and
And
again,
adults,
and again.
dude, they, like 10 years later, they'll be like, man, Travis told me I didn't roll like that, but I rolled exactly like the person in front of me.
It depends on the
I
person.
know I did it right. And so that's
There's a lot of that. You're
A
right.
lot of the like adult workshops, I'll be like, nice, that kind of sucked, but I'm happy for you that you tried it, right? Like that's what I'll do with adults, and because I think it's different for like
Breaks the
coaches, right?
tension.
You have to be genuine. That's the big thing. Is like
Yeah,
no
for
matter
sure.
who you're coaching, whatever age group, you have to be genuine. Because if you're working with an age group, they'll be able to pick that up pretty easily. Kids are really good at it,
Yeah.
and adults are really good at it. Teenagers are kind of bad at it, actually. You can kind of fake that one. But
chaos.
teenagers are also the easiest to be genuine with, because you have to inject so much energy into that group anyways.
Yeah.
Because they're just so like morose, because they've been they've been in a classroom for freaking 10 years now, and they're just,
Where
like,
does their
depressed.
soul go? I want to
Dude,
blame
it gets,
something.
It gets
I don't
absorbed
know.
into the brick walls of their 1980s elementary school that they're still repurposing.
Mhm.
It just
Ferris
like
Bueller's Day Off.
the school just sucks the soul out.
Breakfast
of them.
Club. Breakfast Club.
Yeah.
That's a Breakfast Club reference.
So,
It's true.
So, coach,
yeah.
good.
I was just gonna say that it's like regardless of what age group you're working with, being genuine and not being genuine is a coaching crime as well,
Mhm.
right? Like coming in and be like, good, nice,
Yep.
awesome. Like nobody wants feedback from a robot. It's like on one of those typing games where it was like, perfect.
Perfect.
Like nobody's like, yeah.
Oh, that's the.
Right? They're
that's
just
the-
like, he has to say that. He's coded to say that.
Right.
Software forces him to.
Yeah, my daughter Nova hates the one thing she hates about remote school is like the disingenuous like robot tests, right? Where you answer the questions and then it just like fires back. You're like, almost, try again. It's just like, oh.
Nova would hate that.
Totally can't complain.
I can see her
about
growling,
it.
But,
Cannot stand it.
so I'm like, so a challenge if you're the coach that like you just find it hard to give genuine compliments, and there are some people out there that does that. My challenge would be when you coach a class, you can't ever use the same positive cue
Mm-hmm. That's good.
twice. So you can't, like, if a kid hits a precision and you're like, nice, and a next one hits it, you can't say nice again. You can say great,
Yeah.
or you can say awesome, and eventually you'll be like, I'm really running out of one-word adjectives to throw out here, and you have to be like, Justin, good positioning on the ankles.
Yeah.
Justin, nice job with the arms, right? And those are really where the students start to feel like, oh, this coach knows me. And then when Justin's he's like, let me yeet this, coach. Let me just come on. Let me just go for it. I'm like, Justin, you're not ready. And he'll be like, you know what? This guy knows me. I trust him. I'm okay with this, even though I really want to go for that, right? And so it's like all these little deposits that you got to make, but they got to be genuine. Everything's got to come from a base of genuine. So disingenuous coach That's a crime. That's probably the worst crime against coaching, is somebody who's coaching who just doesn't genuinely care about their students.
I was trying to come up with a name for this one because I kind of feel like coach as audience is what this one kind of bleeds into, is where you have like a coach literally just sitting there watching people. It's like you gave the task out. It's essentially you're one step away from like the workout of the day being written on a dry erase board, right? Where it's like the person would come in, they'd be like, what's the workout? And they're like, it's this, and that. And the person just like sits there with like coffee or whatever. They're on their phone. They're checking their phone. They're like drinking, and they're just like
workout daycare.
It's workout daycare, right? And as audience, you shouldn't just be. You have to be engaged, right? The engagement, I think, is missing from a lot of beginner and novice coaches, or especially coaches who are just fatigued. Maybe they're working, like some people are working 8 hours of coaching, or teachers are working full days teaching, right? I could totally see getting to that point where like the energy is just like you're just on autopilot, right? It's very easy when you do one class a week to come in fresh and enthusiastic. But I think that what you mentioned would be a really cool drill for like a coaching cert, which would just be, okay, you have 3, even a minute. We have to test it, 1 minute to 3 minutes, and you have one person who's like, be the coach, like you or me or someone, just like jumping around and swinging and doing things, and then the coach has to continually give positive feedback, but can never use the same thing. So by the time you'd be 30 seconds into it, you'd have to be very descriptive about what you thought a good job was.
And the more descriptive you get, the harder it is if you have a group to be able to get it to them, right? So you've got maybe 2 seconds before they're on to the next thing, especially with children. And like adults, you could sit them down and be like, that was the most beautiful lache I think I've ever seen in my life.
My goodness.
And they'll be like, he's lying.
Yeah, you're right. Oh yeah, totally.
And I'm like, it wasn't though. It was beautiful.
Like, no,
for you.
I have trust issues.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, you've got to be quick, right? You've got to be like, nice work on that. Bend your knees a little bit more, right? Like those are like the cues that need to come out quicker. Mm-hmm. And if it's positive, it's tough because sometimes you should be like, I like the smile on that one. Can be a positive cue, even if the kid just straight up knee landed that whole precision. You'd be like, wow, I like how you were smiling the whole time.
Good attitude.
Yeah. But you can't get really specific. I love the way that your hair waved in the air as you were jumping. Like that's just too specific.
I might use that one actually.
Well, I think I could use that, yeah, for
really?
sure.
I guess we do have some students who have like really long hair, and I ask them all the time why they don't tie it up. Because my hair is not like super long,
Colin's
right?
beard,
but I have to have something on my head when I'm training because it gets in my
mask.
And so I'll be like, wow, I don't know how you saw through all your hair, but that's cool.
Like, you did that blind, that was amazing.
Imagine if you tied your hair up, you'd be amazing.
All right. That's hilarious.
No. I don't need it.
Yeah, I think when I'm coaching, I try to not let a single student perform any move without some sort of feedback from me. Warm up is one thing. Obviously, you don't need to be so picky about that. But when they're practicing a skill or a progression, they need to go slow enough. The class needs to rotate slow enough that almost every single kid has a chance every single time they perform something to get either a look from you or, just an expression or more solid feedback on how to fix things. But if they're just doing it on their own, they're just inside their own head. And again, they're imagining themselves doing something that's probably not the way it is.
Almost no one has an accurate picture of themselves performing these things. You're totally right. That's where dance is pretty good about that because you get a mirror.
And you're like, mirror. Very true.
Mm-hmm. Not good. But yeah, and coaching cues don't always have to be verbal, right? Like sometimes I'll be across the gym and I'll have two groups working on different things, and I'll look over at the other group and I'll see somebody hit it, and I'll be like, Justin.
Yep.
And that's it, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, got it, right?
That was a gnarly sign for listeners.
Yeah, it was like. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, anybody listening, I did a hand symbol. I was like, hey, listeners, listen to this. Yeah, but sometimes you can just like a thumbs up or just a big smile and like expressive body language where you're like, where you're like, I'm making it like the excited face, like my mind just got blown.
Your mind blown emoji.
Like just pantomiming some of those things, especially for kids, like can be really powerful as a positive cue. And sometimes they could just eat it and you're like, And they're like, yeah, my coach he knows that I'm trying.
Yeah, one of my favorite cues when I can't remember who I specifically got this from, but it was another coach I think that I was working with, and he's like, oh, whenever kids and they fall down, I'm just like, that was a surprise. And I'm like, I use that one all the time. So they'll like look up, they'll look up at you and be like they're about to cry and be like, well, wasn't that a surprise? And then they're like, yeah, didn't look at it that way. Right, so then it releases the tension.
Yep.
That's a good cue.
I feel like, have you guys seen the thing where like you have like a toddler or like a baby and they're holding them, and then as you walk by like a door frame, you smack the door frame, and then you're like, oh, I'm so sorry, and the baby's like, and starts to like cry, right? I feel like sometimes students, if you're one of our students, this is not at all insulting. I'm not trying to be mean, but sometimes I feel like students can be like that. Mm-hmm. Right? Where if you, especially with children and adults, again, teens kind of exist in their own little world, but if you're like, oh my gosh, that was a terrible bail, they reinforce that, right? They're like, oh, I'm super scared of that now. But if you're like, wow, they're just like, that's it, wow?
Yeah.
He's gonna don't give it.
This one is tough too, because sometimes like you do see something and you're like, oh, and everyone does that noise.
Yep.
But that's almost the worst when you're bailing and you hear people like before you hit the ground, the first thing you're registering and everybody being like, oh, it's like, oh well, this is gonna be bad.
Yeah.
So
I think traditional sports like football does this really well, where somebody gets like knocked over or somebody gets hurt. You know, your EMTs go out there and they pull them off the field. And then when they're coming off the field, people are clapping and cheering for that person, right? I'm not sure where that came from. I'm sure there's like some machismo. It's usually when the guy stands up and gets back in line and everyone's like, rub some dirt in it, right? Maybe that's its origins. But that's really cool. Like when a kid bails in class, you know, small or big, like giving them positive reinforcement. Like, I like the way that you really went in for that. You know, we'll get it next time. Like, awesome job on getting 2 feet on that rail. The issue was we just didn't get enough distance, right? But giving those positive reinforcements, cheer after the bail, those matter so much when it comes to getting your student to come back to that thing at the same level or better than they were before. So
yeah, and it is very important after a bail to get your kid back onto a winning progression.
In a winning mindset.
Absolutely, for sure. Because that is a toxic one that's very hard to get out. So, and that's why I don't like bailing over and over again constantly, because you're just not winning ever. And so when you need progressions that, you know, anyone can do, and it feels like it gets you through the whole flip. Because a lot of times people, or a whole move, they witness these moves like a Kong vault or a cat leap or a lache, and flips are the worst at it, and they think it is one move when it is just 100 slices of different things, and you can be succeeding at parts of those, but if you don't land at the very end, it feels like you failed the whole thing.
Yep.
So
being able to break up a movement into achievable and actionable sections matters.
Yeah.
So that when they do put it together, they're able to recognize, I've landed this first part, I've landed this second part, I've landed this third part. I know that I can land all three of these things. I just have to be able to put them together. And it's a sign you were saying earlier, like, I know I can let my kid or my student keep trying it if I'm like, hey, that was a good attempt. What happened? And they're like, I didn't use my arms enough. Or I forgot to tuck my knees. Right? You can be like, cool. Yep, you got it. That means that you did a good job as a coach of segmenting the movement into pieces that they can understand. And you're like, hey, this flip is set and takeoff, tuck and rotation, opening and landing, right? Just an easy 3-part for flips, right? And if they don't land it, you can be like, hey, what was it? And they were like, oh, I opened too soon. Cool, you know, it's part 3. We talked about that, right? It's the opening and the landing, and that's where part 1 and 2 were great. And your student can recognize that. Then that's when you can let them kind of keep attempting it, right? And then, you know, if they keep failing on that last part, then you're like, okay, cool, let's work on just that specific part 3, that, you know, opening and landing, and take it somewhere else. But yeah, if your kid's like, I didn't do it. Like, what didn't you not do? The whole thing? Yes, but I didn't flip. Like, okay.
Yeah. Oh, and that brings me up the other one. It's like there are some cues that I think should never be used, and it's the jump harder, jump higher,
Said more.
Yes, said more.
Do more.
It's like
Yeah.
the like ethereal, like just like do what you know you should be doing, but since I said it, all of a sudden you're gonna do it magically. Like it's like when people say to flip higher, it's unimaginably frustrating. If you are the person trying to flip harder for like 3 years and you're just like, I don't know how to flip higher. Like I know the definition of the word higher. Please stop saying it to me.
It's like
So-
somebody like lifting and you're like, and they fail on a back squat and you're like, just back squat harder, man.
Yeah.
You'll
You
get
push
it.
harder.
You just remember, engage your legs. And you're like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
That's what I'm doing.
Yeah, sometimes I feel like, again, those mechanistic comments, that's where cues come in play. So I think that a lot of wisdom comes from coaches in their progressions, and I think a lot of wisdom comes from coaches in their, well, the best one is the intuition of just understanding what someone's capable of, and then the other one is the being aware of like what the potential like risk is for whatever the progression is they're putting them towards. In parkour, I think a super common one that I see, a couple common ones that I see are, and flips, I really worry about it. I will just say something about that because people do talk about elements of the flip that need to be corrected sort of mid-flip. And when you've got somebody who goes in to do a flip and then they're trying to think about making a change, that half second of like delay in the movement while they're sort of in the air thinking about something, I feel like that has to be like a whole part that they work on. Either they need to be pulled and work on a progression where that progression emphasizes what needs to be corrected mid-flip instead of being like, when you're in the air, make sure blah, blah, blah. It's like when you're in the air, make sure you don't land on your head or your arm and hyperextended. Or
You've got bigger things.
you got bigger things to worry about.
Milliseconds to think about something and execute it. In flips, you're really easy to visualize, but you also have that same problem in Terra. You have milliseconds to get your second foot in place for precision. So, and to give someone a cue, especially midair, or to tell them to do it in the middle of their flip, or especially if they're dealing with fear as well, it's such a hard task for those kids to accomplish.
Yes, like some of the ones that I run into specifically are, the biggest one when I'm working with new people is not having a appropriate ankle strength or proprioception to be able to understand what where the foot placement needs to be. So any jump onto an object needs to be stable so it doesn't go forwards or backwards. Like those plow boxes love to flip forward if you hit them too far forward. But also that the foot, the minimum of the midfoot is over the object. So a super common one for kids and adults is to start to overextend their strides or reach, because in the beginning when people are training, they aren't actually striding when you say stride. We say stride pre, but they're really
big steppy.
the big steppy, jumpy, right? It's not really a stride. They're reaching and they're covering that distance with their gait instead of actually taking off and landing on one foot. So when they do actually get the confidence, or when the reach is so far, as a beginner, I always make my students hit with the whole foot over the object, right? So there's this inclination to sort of hop or jump to things and let the ball of the foot be on the edge in like the 2 foot of precision landing position. Mm-hmm. But sometimes people don't realize that how much the second foot is helping. You know what I mean? Like they'll go, like, well, I did this with 2 feet, so I should be able to do it with 1, but that's half the load difference, right?
Yeah,
and maybe more.
It's twice the load and half the surface area.
Yeah. And it could be your weaker leg and any number of things, right? And there's velocity in there. So I would say the good cues for that one to just that if I see someone coaching and they aren't paying attention to stuff like that, I immediately think that coach needs more attention on things. So that, and then working on rails too soon. I don't like to see rails. I'm just going to call out some like specific parkour faux pas, and you guys can give some techniques too, but I just throw some meat in it. I don't like to see newer athletes training on rail precision or even rail balance, and the coach isn't paying attention to the position of their ankle relative to the bar. So if you're on like a lateral plane and the ball of the foot is on the rail, then you have control and strength enough that the heel doesn't dip too far. Now, if we're making a minor adjustment and it goes, but people who are hanging in rail balance with their ankles sub-rail, they're just on the connective tissue. Like this is, even though they claim that they're very flexible and they have great ankles, if they don't have the strength and range of motion there, they can't take load. Cool, you can stand there like that, but as soon as I say, hey, jump even a foot to that rail, you're just going to bottom out, and it's not going to be good for you. You won't be able to do anything with it. So that's one that I look for is basic foot placement. Is there support for the foot until we get the calves strong enough and the tension, like Justin's saying, the timing of those 2-foot landings to meet at the same time. I always reference I used to have a technique in wushu. My wushu coach would always like yell at me for making 2 sounds on my landings, like to do a clean, if it sounds like. Yeah, I would always get yelled at that because a lot of times we would hit a kick or a trick or a technique, or we do a jump, we do a jump outside, slap the foot or whatever, and land. The land had to be both feet. That's 2 feet sound like that, not like that, and that presents risk for injury when we do precisions and they sound like.
Yep.
Right. And that and jumping through bars.
Because I use the same. I use the audio cue when students are doing the precisions too. It's one sound.
You guys seen that?
Wushu had it first time.
Clip without like a toddler,
and
he's
like thousands of years ago.
And he's like breaking a board. He's like maybe 3. A little like Asian kid. He's in a martial arts studio and he's supposed to stomp and break the board.
Yes.
But he can't get it, so he steps on it and the like instructor's like, "Harder, you got this." And he's like stomps and he doesn't get it, and so then the little guy does 2 foot jumps on it and he's like jumping on it, and the coach pulls him off and he's like, 1 foot. He's like jump through the board. It's like one sound. He's stomping on it and he can't get it, and so he like jumps.
That's
it's
great.
so adorable. Wow. And he like pushes him off and he's like,
no, 1 foot. I think that the translation, or I think that the Chinese part was 一次到位, and I think that meant in one moment you arrive at the position, right? So there was the intention of sound, but the additional attention of that time, right? Yeah. The time is in one moment you're on it, right?
Yeah.
And I think I may have butchered one of those in there, but I think it's close.
It's all right. You guys have any other crimes against coaching that you want to toss in there?
Bars, jumping to bars.
Oh yeah, I mean, if we want to get specific, we can talk about like swinging. If you got a new student, they shouldn't be doing swinging.
We talked a little about lower body. I just want to make some comments about upper body since we talked about flips. We talked about jumping a little bit. The assumption that, again, I just cannot sleep at night when I'm looking at that. When I'm looking at someone, again, you're failing through learning, or you're trying to learn some strength technique as part of a high impact technique, right? So we don't even know if someone can hang from a bar, but we're going to tell them to jump to a bar. And we assume that there's some parallel universe in physics that exists where it's like, even though a person can't hang, if they were to jump to the bar, then they would suddenly have this strength.
Oh yeah, jumping to a bar, you almost need to be like Super Saiyan 3 mode before you just do it. And no point should you ever just like, I feel like jumping to that bar and give it a shot. I don't do that, but particularly as a kid, if your hands are sweaty or, the bar is sweaty from the kid before you, like there's just jumping to the bar without being in the mode to jump to bars is just asking for yourself to slip out on it.
It's just an experience thing too, right? Like very rarely have I encountered an adult who's like, yeah, I do hanging like every day. Mm-hmm. Right? And so as a result of that, I'm like, so last time you were swinging was when you were 7 years old on the playground.
Yep. And you also remember that you had no problem on the monkey bars.
Yeah.
You were an Olympic freaking gymnast, so doing
skipping 2 monkey bars at a time.
Right, that's how you remember it. But then if I went back in time and looked at you were a hot mess. And hang on one barely.
We talked about that, right? How like sometimes you'll hit something and you'll take a long break and you'll come back and your nervous system will be like, "Yep, I remember that. We can still do it."
Nope.
Right, but your body has atrophied, or you've gotten heavier, or you've gotten lighter, or you've had several concussions, and so your vestibular system is different now. Yeah, just things are different. You always need to test and retest before you just go into these heavy things. And with new students, hopefully, in like 5 to 10 years, I live in a different world where I can trust that people are doing hanging daily. But anytime I get a new student, I'm like, you haven't hanged in years, so we're just going to start with basic assisted hanging. And they're like, but I can do a weighted pull-up. And I'm like, great. the force that you exert on a weighted pull-up is like 1/80th of the force that we're going to generate when you swing. All right.
So I think that, what do you guys think a good metric is? For
60-second hang.
And then a single arm hang?
I want 25 seconds on a single arm hang.
Okay.
25
on a bar.
25 is pretty good.
Yeah, I would even take 50, just show that you can do it for some period of time, and then
if you can hang one arm without the rotation, if you immediately let your hand go and you start doing that twist
to the turnout.
On one hand.
I'm talking just passive, 25 passive.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you're doing an active, I would take 15.
Yeah. Okay. I think those are good because people aren't imagining that if you lose one hand, you're on the other one. And I just saw, we're talking about the people who believe what they used to be able to do, and so much is sort of like guiding when you have a new student through some of their exploration, because they're just wondering. They're getting a little mad scientist on themselves. You know what I mean? They start to get some confidence. They're like, oh man, I can jump to that. And this parkour thing, I'm a kid again. And they jump to a bar. I mean, I know I wrecked myself early on training, trying things like that on my own. I remember doing essentially like a power stride off a plyo box to an 8-foot bar, and then grabbing and swinging, just going completely like vertical and dropping like 8 feet on the ground, hitting the back of my head and being like, gosh.
And just being like,
oh, it knocked the wind out of me. Yep.
Doing that like gasping, like a Dementor just swooped by you.
And then you guys, I remember I was training with you at that time, and you guys were like, why did you do that? Like, I don't know, I just saw the bar and it was within reach. So that's a lot of coaching has to be like, okay, they're going to jump there, and then what's around them, that bar. Don't jump to that bar. I wasn't going to jump to that bar. And they get down there and they kind of like start reaching for it, like something's possessed them. And they're like, oh, I just want to do it.
Oftentimes when setting up for a class, I'll set up a drill and then I'll be like, nope, they're going to jump there. And so I'll slide the box over here, or I'll move a box in the way, right? Or if there's a bar there and I can't adjust my setup because there's just too much, and I know that there's like a tempting bar jump, I'll straight up drag a vault box underneath that bar, so it's like they can't swing. There's just a little window now. And then they can jump and try and cat leap it and stuff like that, and I can have something fun to add
Sometimes
to it.
I put the foam noodles over it, so it's like completely out of bounds. You're just like,
I worry about the foam noodle because I think
they'll still jump at it.
Kids, they'll jump for it, dude. And I'm like, dang it. They're like,
they're
like, oh my gosh, Ninja Warrior. So part of coaching is being able to predict and see those sorts of things that your students are going to want to do, and just out of sight, out of mind, getting it out of the way so that you don't
that's
have
very
to
good. Predict the chaos, right?
It's the chess of coaching.
Yes, because sometimes you have a course set up and you're like, this is perfect. I really want this move in there. They're gonna have a blast with it, but you just need to like look at the 2 feet to the left, and if there's that bar sticking out, or there's just something
behind them,
enticing, you're gonna have to change your favorite part of the course, because kids are just gonna see. They're gonna be curious. They're gonna want to do something different than the rest of the class. So,
or you have to look at it from their height,
yes,
right? Or from their height. Like sometimes I do a lot of those like high school workshops, and I don't know what they feed kids in high school these days. But I was like a little shorter, but not like a ton shorter when I was in high school, and now they're like all taller than me by like magnitudes of feet. There's like dude's like 6'4", and I'm like, okay, I have to look at things from his perspective as well when I'm setting stuff up, when I'm coaching him, because otherwise, he might get himself in trouble doing this jump, and there's a bar there that I can just yeet, right? But for him, he's gonna jump and boom, like top of his head. Now he's out, and so I have to think about these things too.
And it doesn't matter. You can call it out. Like the number of times I've been like, and you can go over here and here, and there's a bar here. Don't hit your head on it. I'll turn around and be like, boom.
You're like,
lunchtime.
So
yes, actually, Jesse brings up the one, my most personal pet peeve is forgetting the height of your students, and like they'll hold the noodle there for jumping over it for like all the average kids, and there comes this like one kid who's 2 feet tall, and they're just like, all right, Billy. And Billy's like, really? He's like, I gotta stick up, or I gotta keep up with the tall kids. And then Billy tries to freaking run and jump over the noodles that's taller than his head, but the coach forgets to lower it for people
to adjust.
You gotta remember those little kids, man. Their knees are like that high, like inches off the ground. You can't keep the noodle the same for those kids.
This is personal for Justin.
Because those guys have like those, especially the little ones, have the most like, I have to do it. If everyone else did it, I have to do it too. I have to keep up. So you have to just like sneak a little inch down without hurting their self-esteem there.
Yeah, and sometimes you gotta box the self-esteem just a little bit.
Yeah.
Just be like, you can't. You literally cannot hit that jump. Okay, you will die if you hit that jump.
Yeah. No.
This isn't a preference.
You shouldn't be doing that 8-foot gap to the foam pit. No, you just turned 8, dude. Sorry.
Yeah.
So, anyways,
That's the problem with good coaching.
there's
I
think on this topic we could probably go for another hour and a half talking about like crimes against coaching, but I think we listed some really good ones that are pretty common for newbie coaches and experienced coaches to slip into without knowing it.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully you guys got something out of it, and Cullen can make a list of them of each.
Oh yeah.
We can come up with a fun alliteration for each one.
We're spotlight's on us now. Now we can't make any of these mistakes. So.
Yeah, this is definitely an episode that the staff gets to listen to. So.
And yet, I say, call me out on it if you see me in there. Don't call me out in the middle of class because I will.
I mean, it's all things we've been.
But pull me aside, if you're like, hey,
you
did
all
that.
these
I want to know that.
We've done the mistakes before.
Yeah. And if I slip into that, by all means, be like, you pulled a Huckett, Harry.
I'd
be like, damn it, like, dude.
Don't you YOLO coaching right now, Jesse? No. Get your eyes off that 10-foot pillar.
Well, thanks for tuning in, guys. If you're listening to us, know that you can watch us and see our pretty faces. You can also see my hang loose gesture that you missed. If you're listening on YouTube,
lots of animation.
If you're watching us on YouTube and you got that YouTube red, which means you're really listening to us, you want to watch us, you can. We're also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all those other things. Anchor, which I don't exactly know what is, but it's a thing.
It's a place where you can give us money if you wanted to.
It's like $5, right?
You can put whatever you want on there.
Oh, sweet. So yeah, if you like want to buy us a coffee or something, because Travis always gets a coffee, Justin always gets a coffee. So we're eating into coffee fund. So if you want to buy them a coffee, please, by all means, that would be great.
Or if you want to buy us a Lambo.
Lamb chop. If you want to do that, it'll go to Travis.
Yeah.
Actually, it'll go to Outrun as a whole.
And then we'll scrap it for an obstacle in the new gym.
Ooh, that would be pretty cool. But anyways, thanks for tuning in to this show. This episode of the Outrun Show. We'll catch you guys next time.
Yep. See you guys.
Bye-bye. It has to be the P or the